This TikTok squatter just spent 9 months living in a $2.3 million mansion, posting TikToks from inside like it was hers, all while arguing she didn't need permission to be there.
Spotlight on Maryland reported in December about 2 alleged squatters who took over a $2.3 million house in Bethesda. Tamika Good, the squatter and self-described pro se litigation coach, featured the estate in a TikTok video posted on her account just 6 days ago. Good was charged last year with multiple counts of burglary, trespassing, and other crimes associated with her squatter takeover of a multi-million-dollar Bethesda home.
How do these people exist? How do you steal someone's house and blatantly brag about it online? Does shame not exist anymore for some people? Like, if she's pulling up in a Porsche, she could afford housing. Unless she stole the Porsche as well. But after 9 months of occupying the mansion, Tamika Good was found guilty on all counts of trespassing and breaking and entering on January 22nd. Which, after hearing the full story, it's obvious that that ruling was a long time coming, because for more than 9 months, a mansion in Bethesda, Maryland, one of the wealthiest suburbs outside of Washington, D.C., was being lived in by someone who did not own it and did not rent it, and didn't even have permission to be there. That person was Tamika Good. Tamika describes herself as a pro se litigation coach, which essentially means that she represents herself in legal matters and gives advice to others on doing the same. You know that she would be best friends with the TikTok psychic because she also loves to destroy her own life and then represent herself in court. But either way, I hope that anyone who watched her content can see how badly representing herself went for her. She basically has a lot of confidence in how well she understands the law and posts about it a whole lot, which I guess some of that confidence might be gone because now she's privated her TikTok. But Good was really active on social media throughout the entire situation. Instead of treating the mansion like a temporary hiding spot, no, she treated it like a backdrop. She posted TikTok videos from the property, filmed inspirational content, and spoke about her legal battles. And in most of these clips, she talks about herself like she's the victim, rather than someone occupying a house without permission. Like, ma'am, you broke into that house. That house is not yours, and you have no lease contract. What are you on about? In one video filmed with the mansion right behind her, she shows off the house less like evidence in a criminal case and more like a prop in a vision board. It was kind of like she was like manifesting living in some mansion, and instead of, providing enough value to society to be rewarded to do so, she just breaks into one and calls it her own. Like, what is going on here? And obviously, just like in most of my videos, her online footprint did her no favors, because prosecutors later pointed to her own videos and posts as evidence that she knew exactly what she was doing by trying to exercise control over the property. In other words, her content helped show the intent. So in court, Good chose to represent herself, awesome, great move, but I guess at least she followed through with what she posted online. If she's coaching people how to represent themselves in court, if she's not representing herself in court, that's kind of hypocritical. So at least she's not a hypocrite in that way. I am really reaching to give her some kudos here, but essentially she argued that the ownership of the home was unclear because it was foreclosed on, and she claimed that the absence of a posted no trespassing sign meant that she couldn't be certain that she was doing anything illegal. What do you mean? This is like saying, hey, if you go on vacation, you better put up a no trespassing sign or else Tamika Good might break in and claim your house as her own. What a complete moron. But still, she framed herself like she was being targeted, but people living nearby reported a stranger living in a luxury home, posted online, and refusing to leave. So imagine being one of the neighbors, and then suddenly you scroll past and you find out one of your new neighbors just broke into the house and is now posting on TikTok how they broke into the house and are now living there. Like, what? It's getting dystopian out here, guys. But basically, at some point last year, Good moved into the home and simply stayed. And the property was vacant and tied up in foreclosure issues, which turned out to be the opening that she needed. And once she was inside, she refused to leave. Neighbors noticed, but months went by and nothing happened. Can you imagine if you lost your home in a foreclosure and you actually leave the property when demanded to, but then randomly some TikToker decides to pull up and just starts living in the property for free? But despite complaints and attempts to get her removed, the situation just kept being treated like a civil matter, not a criminal one, which means there was no immediate eviction, just a slow legal crawl while someone lived full-time in a luxury mansion that wasn't theirs. And what's so ironic is it was like, what, 2 months ago, if even, that we covered a similar case in the same area, basically. Like, this is in Bethesda, Maryland. The other case we were covering was like, I think it was like Northwest DC. So they're not even that far away from each other. It's like a half-hour drive, if even. And obviously, instead of keeping a low profile, she did the opposite. She posted about it a lot. Of course she did, or else we wouldn't be covering it here on this channel. So she filmed a whole bunch of TikToks where the house looked like it was a part of her lifestyle. And according to the people living nearby, the longer this dragged on, the worse it felt. One neighbor later described the ordeal as almost like a year of terror because of how helpless everyone felt watching this play out. But the wildest part about this story is this case didn't go forward because of, the bank or the police, but because a 19-year-old college student who lived nearby finally decided to file some criminal charges himself. So Ian Chen lived nearby with his parents when his family realized someone was illegally squatting in a $2.3 million mansion just a few doors down. And they did what I guess you would expect. They called the police. And according to Chen, nothing happened. He later then said that they reached out for help, but were basically told there wasn't much anyone could do. Meanwhile, the person squatting in the house was still there. And Chen said the neighborhood was scared, especially the elderly residents. So instead of waiting for the system to wake up, Chen decided to file criminal charges himself for trespassing and breaking and entering. And the system, very late, finally caught up. So once this all finally made it to court, Good did the whole "I don't understand who owned the house" thing, which, just because you don't know who lives in a house doesn't mean you can just show up, break in, and live there. Like, again, this is so crazy that there's enough loopholes to be able to do this for 9 months. Like, ma'am, we're not living under a zombie apocalypse. You can't show up to Bill Murray's house and just say, "Yeah, we're living here now." No, it doesn't work like that. But I guess she just went with that argument anyway, saying that because she didn't know who owned it, she didn't know that she was actually trespassing. And my main question here is, how do people do stuff like this and not live in constant anxiety? Like, ultimate nightmare. You're squatting in this house. Somehow the owner gets the house out of foreclosure. They show up to the house at like 4 a.m. They turn on the lights with you sleeping, and they're just standing there in the doorway staring at you. That is not how I would want to live. I don't care how nice the house is. I am not going to squat in a house that's not mine. Just like 99.999% of the population. And then her other legal defense, like I mentioned previously, was there was no trespassing sign. Like, how would I know? So essentially her whole position is like, well, I wasn't told no, so I can just live there. What kind of entitlement is this? But regardless, prosecutors were dealing with someone who entered a property, changed the locks, lived there full time, and posted about it online, all without any permission. And she failed to appear a few times. So they also had to deal with the case getting dragged on. So the state attorney general said, "I know who doesn't own the property, and that's Tamika Good." And I mean, that's fair. She might not have known who owned it, but she for sure knew it was not Tamika Good. But luckily, the judge didn't buy into her argument. He said that she, in quote, had some demented thoughts to justify squatting in the home. Because unfortunately for Tamika, the law doesn't work on vibes. It doesn't work on technicalities you just invent out of thin air. And it definitely does not work on the idea that if ownership looks complicated, you just get a free trial period for a mansion. Like, hello, what's going on here? So obviously, once those arguments fell apart, the case started being about intent, and that's where her own behavior came to haunt her. Because while all of this was dragging on, Good was over here making TikToks in the house, documenting everything. So a whole bunch of the prosecution's case ended up coming from Good's own TikTok videos, where she openly showed herself entering and exiting the property, posing with it, and treating the mansion like it was hers. So when you think about intent with a case like this, the question is, did the person knowingly occupy the property? Were they exercising control over it? Were they acting like the owner? And Good answered all of those questions herself on camera. Great job. Essentially, she is her own defense attorney and the prosecutor against herself all at once. I mean, well played. But finally, on January 22nd, Tamika Good was found guilty on all counts of trespassing and breaking and entering. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail and fined $500, which is crazy low. That really does not decentivize people from doing this again. Free rent for 9 months in a beautiful mansion, 90 days of also free rent in a less optimal place to be in though. I feel like if you have enough problems, that almost sounds like a win. And the fine for $500 could just essentially be your rent for that whole year. 9 months free, 3 months also free, but in a jail facility. So that's a full year of free rent right there. Or well, a full year of rent for $500. It's like 40 bucks and some change a month to live in a mansion. And then, you know, multi-million-dollar house, multi-million-dollar facility. They're both expensive places. One less ideal, obviously. I don't know, man. But either way, she was arrested right there in the courtroom. And apparently there was also a second person living in the mansion named Corey. So that's interesting, but he didn't even show up for the court hearings. So more than likely, though, that's probably because he also had an unrelated warrant, which he ended up being arrested for as well. So this dude couldn't even show up to court because if he did, he would be arrested for something entirely different. Like... Awesome, guys. Why are you committing more crimes if you already have warrants for your arrest? But when Tamika was questioned by a reporter, she lashed out and told him to get out of her face. So that's cool, I guess. I feel like the homeowners would probably respond, get out of my house. But at this point, her entire plot just fell apart.
Judge John C. Moffitt gave remarks before he made the ruling, telling Good she had some demented thoughts to justify squatting. The prosecution replied, "This is frankly nuts." Good was found guilty on all counts of burglary and breaking and entering and immediately sentenced to 90 days in prison.
I think the District Court of Maryland did the right thing today.
Ian Chen, a 19-year-old living with his parents in a neighboring house to the home Good occupied, brought the case before a Maryland commissioner's office because he said he wanted to take back the neighborhood from criminals.
So at least there's kind of a happy ending to the story. But I mean, this is the second time I'm covering something this crazy in the same area in like, what, 2 months? So how does this happen so often? But apparently in Maryland, squatting often isn't even treated like a crime, at least not at first. In most cases, police are told to step back and let the courts handle it as a civil dispute, especially when the property is vacant or tied up in foreclosure. So clearly, she did know a thing or two when it came to selecting the house. But either way, you can't TikTok your way into home ownership unless you make a whole bunch of money from TikTok and you actually buy a home yourself. You can't just break into someone's house and make a whole bunch of TikToks acting like you live in the house and now suddenly you live in the house. Doesn't work like that. Sorry about that. But hey, other than that, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe, drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.